Have you ever lived in a house filled with comfort and everything you need, yet felt like a stranger, asking for permission just to touch the person you love? I'm a legal escort. I've worked with hundreds of men, many of them married, many over 50. Most of them didn't come looking for thrills. They came looking for something that used to be theirs: intimacy, warmth, a moment without rejection. No one teaches men what to do when affection disappears from their marriage. They're just told to endure, to be strong, to stay. But being invisible isn't strength, and silence doesn't make the need go away. In the next 20 minutes, I'll share 6 honest reasons why men like you, good men, end up in rooms like mine. If this feels worth hearing, please like this video, subscribe, and comment "love" below. I want to know who's still here with me. The first time a married man told me he hadn't touched his wife in over 2 years, he said it like a confession. Quiet, careful, like even the walls might judge him. He said it started small. She was tired. Then she was stressed. Then there was menopause, or work, or just not tonight. Eventually, she stopped giving reasons at all. It became a kind of unspoken rule. Don't ask, don't expect, and for God's sake, don't take it personally. But he did. They all do. One man told me, "It's not just the sex, it's the absence. I miss her weight next to me in bed. I miss feeling wanted." He still loved his wife. Still brought her coffee in the morning. Still fixed the broken drawer in the bathroom. Still held her coat when they went out. But after months of reaching for her and being met with silence, or worse, that tight, polite smile, something inside him began to close too. You might be surprised how many men wait a year or more before they do anything about it. And even then, they don't go looking for someone like me. They search for answers first. Marriage counselors, testosterone clinics, meditation apps. Some even try to lose weight, thinking maybe desire disappeared because they let themselves go. But it didn't. What disappeared was the invitation. And after enough nights lying next to someone who treats you more like a roommate than a partner, the need starts to ache. Not just in the body, but in the chest, in the ego, in the quiet place where your sense of worth used to be. By the time they find me, they aren't swaggering or smug. They're usually nervous, gentle, grateful just to be touched again without having to beg. And let me be clear, these are not men chasing thrill or conquest. These are men who have been loyal for decades, who changed diapers, paid bills, showed up every day even when they were falling apart inside. When they walk into my room, they're not trying to escape their marriage. They're trying to remember who they used to be before they were told that wanting affection was somehow weak, needy, or shameful. One client, a retired engineer, told me, "I just want to feel human again." Is that too much? It never is. And here's what most people don't understand. I'm not competing with their wives. I'm not a replacement. I'm a mirror. I reflect back the man they once were, the man they still are, under all that dust of disappointment. Some of them cry, not because of the sex, but because they realize how long it's been since someone touched them without conditions. What breaks them isn't rejection, it's becoming invisible. So if you're hearing this and thinking, "That sounds like me," I want you to know, you're not alone and you're not broken. But this story, this ache, it has to be acknowledged somewhere. And for many men, that first acknowledgement begins in a quiet room, with someone who sees them not as a wallet, not as a failure, but simply as a man who still wants to be held. He sat across from me, perfectly composed in his navy blazer, polished shoes, and wedding ring he hadn't taken off in 27 years. "You know what's funny?" he said. "If I get divorced, I lose half my company, half my retirement, probably half my friends. But I already lost all of her." He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was tired. The kind of tired that settles into your bones after years of pretending that silence is peace and distance is normal. And he's not alone. For so many married men, the idea of leaving isn't just painful. It's impossible. They've built lives, businesses, reputations. They have children they still read bedtime stories to, mortgages that tie them to zip codes, and communities where being seen as a divorced man feels like social exile. So they stay. Not because they're cowards, but because they're providers, protectors. They take their vows seriously, even when those vows start to feel like handcuffs. And here's what people don't talk about: the guilt of wanting more when you already have so much. These men know they have stability, routine, maybe even a kind of partnership. But what they don't have is affection, curiosity, laughter, the spark that once made them feel alive. One man put it perfectly. He said, "I feel like I'm trapped in a beautiful prison. Everything looks fine from the outside, but I'm slowly disappearing inside." When they come to me, it's rarely with a sense of entitlement. It's with hesitation. They often apologize before they even sit down, as if needing closeness makes them selfish. It doesn't. They're not looking to replace their wives. Most don't even want out of their marriage. What they want is a safe place where they don't have to negotiate for tenderness. A place where they can be seen again, not as a paycheck, not as a father, not as a fixture in the hallway, but as a man with a body, with emotions, with needs that haven't died just because the wedding cake did. Some bring pictures of their kids. Some talk about their last anniversary dinner and how she never once looked up from her phone. Some laugh nervously and say, "I haven't done anything like this before." And I believe them. You can hear the ache behind their jokes. They've tried the quiet compromises, sleeping back to back, swallowing every impulse, pretending they don't notice how cold the bed has become. But intimacy doesn't die all at once. It starves quietly until the silence is unbearable. And sometimes the only option left is not escape, but release. I don't give them permission. I give them pause. A moment to exhale. To remember what warmth feels like. To speak without measuring every word. To be held without having to earn it. It's not about betrayal. It's about survival. Because when leaving would cost them everything, finding someone who lets them feel like themselves again becomes the only way to stay. He didn't cry when he said it. He just looked down at his hands and whispered, "My wife treats me like I'm a wallet and a sperm donor. I'm completely unnecessary in my own home." I remember that sentence because it hit like a quiet thunder. And he wasn't the only man who had said something like it. The phrasing changed, but the feeling didn't. Used, sidelined, reduced. At some point, the role of husband became transactional. He earned, he provided, he protected. But he stopped being wanted. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, as a human being with thoughts and longings. His wife got the house she wanted, the number of children she wanted, the lifestyle she dreamed of. But once all the boxes were checked, intimacy disappeared like it had served its function and was no longer needed. There are women who use sex to get married, and then use marriage to never have sex again. That's not a judgment. It's just what many of my clients describe. They feel like they signed up for a partnership, but ended up in a silent contract with invisible ink one that kept them bound but not embraced. And when they bring this up at home, they're often met with defensiveness, blame, or worse, complete dismissal. You just want sex. You're never satisfied. You're being dramatic. So they stop asking. But not needing affection doesn't make someone stronger. It makes them smaller. It makes them quieter. It makes them lie awake at night wondering, is this what the rest of my life will feel like? Some men stay because of guilt, others out of duty. A few still hold on to hope. But many begin to feel like accessories. Functional but invisible. And here's the secret they never tell their wives. They still find them attractive. Yes, even after the arguments, even after the distance. These men still look at their wives and see the woman they fell in love with. But that woman no longer looks back at them with desire. One man told me, "I would rather be wanted than obeyed." Another said, "I don't need fireworks. I just need to feel like I still matter." It's not about being praised or pampered. It's about reciprocity. When you give everything and receive silence, it begins to erode your sense of worth. So when a man comes to see me, he's not looking for someone better. He's looking for someone who sees him as more than a function. Not a provider, not a servant, not a sperm bank. A man. Sometimes that means holding hands for 10 minutes before anything else happens. Sometimes it means letting him talk uninterrupted. Sometimes it means nothing physical at all. Just space where he doesn't have to explain why it hurts to be invisible. In a world that often treats male desire as crude, selfish, or irrelevant, these men carry their hunger quietly. And when no one in their life offers them a seat at the emotional table, they come to me not for sex, but for remembrance. Remembrance of who they are. Remembrance of what it feels like to be needed. Not for what they provide, but simply for who they are when the wallet closes and the lights are off. He didn't book the appointment to impress me. He didn't wear cologne or talk himself up. He just sat there quietly and said, "I don't remember the last time someone looked at me like I was desirable." That's the word so many men circle around but rarely say out loud. Desirable. They don't need to be adored or idolized. They don't want to be chased through the hallway or worshipped like gods, but they do want to feel like someone still sees them as more than useful. They want to be wanted. What most people forget is that men are human. That may sound obvious, but culturally, we treat male desire as something automatic, unfeeling, even mechanical. We assume men always want, but we never ask if they want to be wanted back. And when that mutual desire dies in a marriage, it doesn't always happen with a fight. Sometimes it dies in silence. In neutral goodnights, in polite nods at breakfast, in years of slowly avoiding touch because it feels obligatory. Many of my clients still find their wives beautiful. They still glance at her in the morning light, still remember how her laughter used to feel like music. But over time, they learned not to reach out, because every time they did, they were met with resistance, rejection, or worse, indifference. One man told me, "I don't want to beg for it. I don't want her to do it just to shut me up. I want her to want me." That's not greed. That's longing. And when they come to me, it's not about what happens behind closed doors. It's about what happens in their eyes. That moment when someone looks at them and sees them again. Not as a coworker, a father, or a man who takes the garbage out every Thursday, but as someone worth wanting. It doesn't take grand gestures. Sometimes it's a soft touch on the arm, a slow breath during conversation, a quiet smile that says, "You're still attractive to someone." Those moments are more powerful than any performance. And no, these men are not weak for needing that. In fact, it takes strength to admit the ache. It takes courage to say, "I feel invisible." Most men have been taught to push those feelings away, to muscle through the loneliness, to treat desire as an inconvenience. But unacknowledged desire doesn't die. It mutates. It turns into resentment, distance, or despair. I'm not a therapist. I don't have a couch or a clipboard. But I listen. And when they talk about the last time they felt wanted, their faces shift. Something opens. Something softens. Because even a brief moment of being seen as desirable without having to prove or perform can bring a man back to life. One client once said to me, "You make me feel like I exist." He didn't mean just physically. He meant emotionally, spiritually, sensually. And that's something no man should have to buy. But many do, because it's been missing from their life for so long that they've forgotten what it feels like. So they come to me. Not because they're desperate for sex, but because they're starving for recognition. Because being wanted is not a luxury. It's part of what makes us human. He was in his early 60s, quiet, polite, freshly shaved. When he walked into the room, he didn't sit right away. Just stood there for a moment like someone trying to remember why they'd walked into a room in the first place. When he finally spoke, his voice was so soft I almost didn't catch it. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say." And I get that. So many of the men I see don't come in carrying a script. They carry silence. Silence that has built up over years, decades even. Silence filled with swallowed emotions, words left unsaid, touches withheld, and questions buried because they didn't seem worth asking anymore. Men aren't taught how to talk about loss, at least not the kind that's still alive. When someone dies, there's a protocol. You grieve, you get support, you get permission to cry. But what about when your marriage dies quietly, while the two of you still share a kitchen? What about when you're still in love with someone who no longer seems to notice that you're even there? There's no handbook for that. So they stay quiet. They don't want to complain, don't want to blame, and certainly don't want to sound weak. But inside, something aches. And not just for sex. It's deeper than that. It's the ache of not being seen, of having no witness to your slow fade. Some of them talk eventually, not right away. Sometimes it takes 20 minutes, sometimes 2 or 3 visits. And when they do, it's rarely about fantasies or desires. It's about memories. The last time she touched his face. The night they laughed together like old friends. The way he used to feel just standing next to her. One man told me, "I talk to you because I can't talk to her, and I don't know why." He wasn't angry. He was lost. In many marriages, especially long ones, couples develop a rhythm. It can be beautiful, but it can also become a cage. You stop asking how each other feels. You stop telling each other the truth. And eventually, you stop even trying, because you assume the answer won't matter. So when they come to me, I'm often the first person in years who's asked, "What's hurting you right now?" And maybe it sounds strange, but some of the most powerful moments I've had with clients involved no touching at all. Just sitting across from a man who finally felt safe enough to say, "I don't feel like a man anymore." Not because he's broken, but because he hasn't been given a space to be whole. And the truth is, a lot of these men have tried to talk to their wives. They've hinted, pleaded, even offered to go to therapy. But when every attempt at connection is met with coldness or confusion, they stop reaching. They tell themselves that maybe it's just how marriage works, that this is what growing old together is supposed to feel like. It's not. We all need places where we can speak without fear of judgment, where we can lay down our armor, even for an hour, and say, "I miss being me." That's why many of them come. Not for sex, not even for escape, but for the rare chance to hear their own voice again and to finally feel like someone is listening. He was one of the kindest men I've ever met. Polite, thoughtful, always brought a coffee for me and never stayed longer than he needed to. And one day, after a quiet moment, he said something I'll never forget. "Now that I have you in my life," he said, "I can give my wife the kind of relationship she wants, with no pressure, no discomfort, no sex. I don't have to bother her anymore." He said it with relief, as though he'd finally found a way to protect her from himself. Let that sink in. A man apologizing for wanting his wife. A man so desperate to avoid making her uncomfortable that he pays someone else just to feel desired, so that at home, he can be the emotionless husband she seems to prefer. This is what happens when desire turns into shame. He didn't come to me because he didn't love her. He came because loving her meant silencing a part of himself. Because he had learned that needing intimacy wasn't just inconvenient, it was disruptive, even selfish. For many men, desire isn't something they chase. It's something they carry like a secret, a source of guilt, something they've been told to control, mute, dismiss. And when it persists, when the need doesn't disappear, they begin to believe something is wrong with them. It's not. Wanting connection, emotional, physical, sensual, isn't a defect. It's human. But in a culture that labels male desire as predatory or childish, men learn to internalize their hunger. They stop expressing. They stop reaching. Eventually, they stop even naming it. And that silence can be deadly. I've met men who haven't kissed anyone in years, who haven't been held, who haven't heard a whisper meant only for them. Not because they're unlovable, but because they no longer feel allowed to be loved in that way. They start to believe that what they want no longer matters, that they should be grateful for companionship, for loyalty, for shared groceries and calendars. That yearning is a luxury they no longer deserve. But here's the truth. Yearning doesn't expire. One man told me, "I don't even know what I'm asking for anymore. I just know that I miss the feeling of being missed." That line stayed with me, because what they're really craving isn't sex, it's reciprocity. The feeling that someone, somewhere, wants them too. It's not about being insatiable. It's about not having to apologize for being alive. And so they come, quietly, carefully, not to betray their marriages, but to preserve a piece of themselves that's dying inside those marriages. They come because they need to be seen, not as monsters, not as fools, but as men who still want to be touched, wanted, remembered. And they know they can't get that at home anymore. Not without guilt, not without being made to feel like they're asking for too much. So they come to me, and I give them what the world has forgotten they still need: permission to want. Without shame, without explanation. Just a quiet room, a soft light, and a moment where being a man isn't something to apologize for. After 50, what matters most isn't how much you've earned or how many responsibilities you've carried. It's how fully you're still able to show up as yourself, without apology, without disguise. That's what I've seen in every man who's walked into my room not out of lust, but out of longing. Not to escape their marriage, but to feel present in their own body again. To be noticed, to be needed, to be human. This isn't about blame. It's not about heroes or villains. It's about reality, one that many men are too ashamed to speak aloud. So if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever lowered your voice because your needs seemed inconvenient, I want you to know, you're not alone. You're not broken. And you're not asking for too much. Because what you're really asking for is to feel alive again. And if no one has said this to you in a while, let me be the one. You still matter. You still deserve closeness, warmth, laughter, desire. None of those things expired with time. They're still waiting. Maybe not at home, but somewhere. If this story made you pause for a moment, please like this video, subscribe, and comment "love" below. Because maybe what you're looking for is exactly what someone else is waiting to hear.